press mold teapot today. We're going to talk about the other stuff you've been finishing up last week tomorrow, but we got a lot to go through. So I wanted to show you all these different parts. I know we talked about this last week, but it's been a while, so just to kind of go over it, the teapot has a bunch of different parts. You've got your spout, you've got the body, you've got the handle, you've got the lid, the handle on the lid, and this one doesn't have one, but also typically a foot. So all those parts have to relate together in some kind of interesting unified way. So whether it's having something like this, like these little blocks that are carved in and added on that repeat throughout to give it a unified look, and then it's sort of a square handle and a square spout to relate to that design, your job is to be thinking about how to make all those parts fit together. And the great thing about a project being made of so many parts is that if it takes you 3 tries to get a spout you like, who cares? Spend a day making spouts. Maybe even just make a bunch before you pick one. Because it's nice that you get to try some parts of it over and over, and it's not all on this big piece yet. So if it doesn't go well, you can just adjust it and make a new one. If you make 5 handles, you've learned a lot about making handles. So it's not a bad idea to even make a few of each thing and see what you like before you get started. So to start, we're going to go through the problem-solving process we've used in the past. Who remembers the first step? This is your brain steps as you're thinking through. Peter, what is it? Identify. Fabulous. Identify. This is step 1. Identify the problem. Now, I would think it'd be a great idea for you to read ahead just a little bit as we're going through this, so you know when I go over something how to fill it in. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you today. I will do little refresher demos again during the course of the project, but this way you kind of have an idea of the whole process and how to do all the different parts, and you can have some choices on what you start with. So I went through identifying the problem. What do you need to do and what do you need to know? The do is all these different parts. What do you need to know is the different building techniques for each of those. We're going to talk a little bit about soft slab construction. You guys have done hard slab, so it's going to be pretty similar. I'm going to demonstrate the press mold construction for you, and then you've used coils and slabs, so that'll help with your foot and your base and your handle and things like that. So we're going to be combining all these things together. Now, we've already done step 2 of the problem-solving process last week when we were in the computer lab. You looked up different kinds of teapots online, you got some inspiration, we did some sketches, and every project's going to be a different type of exploration, but for that one it was really seeing just what possibilities might lie out there for a press mold teapot. So what is that called when we're looking online, sketching possibilities? It starts with an E. What is it? I heard it a bunch of places. It's fabulous. Explore. So explore is our step 2. We've done that. And then for the slab project, your plan was, remember you had the templates and the pattern pieces, and you had it all laid out so you knew which slabs you needed first, you knew how to line it up and get everything set. Here, the plan, I'm going to kind of just go through a demo. And the plan for this is really, I'm going to give you the steps. And then once you know your idea, I'm going to ask you to write, not very detailed, but just to write a little synopsis of how you're going to go through those steps to complete your idea. So that'll be your plan. So kind of the demo is giving you your plan, and then you'll take a few notes with a one major sketch so I know your final idea. All right, so for the planning and the demo, here we go. Building the teapot. You're going to use clay in this stage. I'm on the next line here. Raise your hand if you know what stage we typically build with. What stage of clay? You can raise your hand, please. Raise your hand. Thank you, Peter. I know you. What is it?
Fresh clay.
You know, that's a good point. We have our fresh clay and mature clay. We're the only ones I know of in the world that separated out. We will be using fresh clay for parts of it, but fresh and mature clay are 2 types of what stage? Do you know, Clay? Plastic, exactly. So you're going to be working with plastic clay for this. So it's that gooey plastic clay. Remember plastic, we mush it and it holds its shape. All right, so now we're using plastic clay to build. What is the name? I've mentioned it a couple times. What is the name of this construction technique that we're using? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. I give you a big hint. It's on the page somewhere in fancy lettering. What is it? Press mold. The press mold teapot. And these are your press molds. Our press molds are Bisqueware bowls. And Bisqueware is perfect for this because why do we bisque projects before we glaze them? They're stronger. What else do they do?
They stand up more. They kind of stand out more.
Well, they'll hold the shape more nicely, right? So they're strong. They hold the shape. What does this do with the glaze? Do you remember? When you put the glaze in here, what's this going to do? It soaks it up. There's little pores that soak it up. Exactly. So as I push clay in a press mold, it's going to soak some moisture out of the clay. Well, what happens when you take moisture out of the clay? Can you tell me? What does it do if moisture goes out of the clay? I'm hearing things. It starts to shrink. So as this shrinks, it's going to pull away from the mold, and that means that I can pop the clay out. So that's why press molds work so well and why bisqueware works so well. So I'm going to pick on my mold. I got lots of different kinds. I got some that are a little bit deeper. I have one that's a little bit shallower and has a flat bottom. I have one with a rounded bottom. I have one a little wider with the rounded bottom. We got tons of these. So over here, we'll display them for the first couple of days. Over here are all these press mold bisque bowls that we can use for this project. And what you're going to be doing is choosing ones. You can use the same one twice, or maybe you say, you know what, I kind of want this like rounded top. You know, somebody had a cupcake design. This might work well for that, where the top is rounded. Now this is not really what they look like because they're different on the inside. You gotta look on the inside. But these two seem to line up pretty well. So it looks like if I put this one's got a flat bottom, this one's got a rounded top, maybe that one will work. Maybe we want to go this way. I don't know. We'll try it. I'm going to start with these two because they're not real big and I can get through the demo a little quicker. But I'm going to carefully select my press molds. I'll move these out of the way for you. And I'm going to take some of the more mature clay. I'm going to make it into, what does this look like? What am I doing right here when I pound it out like that? It's just like making a little bitty what, Frankie? A slab. I make a little slab. So I take my slab and I'm going to push it into the press mold. I'm going to take another chunk of clay, pound it out. Now what's different than when I made my big slab with the slab roller? What am I doing that's not quite the same? Anthony, what's different? Can you tell me?
Pounding it out yourself?
I'm pounding it out myself, but am I making a giant slab? Like a giant blob? Or am I just doing individual pieces?
Individual pieces.
Exactly, that's the key. If I make a giant slab and try and like stuff it in here, it's gonna buckle and move. It doesn't work very well. So I want to use smaller pieces. So I just pound out one piece at a time. I put it in here and I want it to stick out of the press mold. So it comes out over the top and I get it all filled. And I want each piece, as I do it, failed to show you that. No, I made that one too thin. I want each piece to be about finger thick. So it's approximate, about the thick, maybe of a thick finger. You know, maybe like the thickness of my thumb. So somewhere around this thickness is what I'm putting on here. And then I'm going to push it into the slab mold, or the press mold. And as I push it in here, I really want to force it into that shape because I want it to take on that shape. And then I'm going to use my thumb and try and even it out. If my clay is an even thickness, I'm much less likely to have any cracking issues or things later where it would dry unevenly. Now if you can get it pretty even with your thumb, fabulous. But we have a whole variety of wooden ribs. Now this one I don't like so much because it's got corners. We have a few of these, don't use those. These rounded guys are fabulous, fabulous for this. So as I'm doing this, I'm gonna pick one that looks like it could match the curve of the bowl I'm using. This bowl had kind of a corner. It wasn't quite that sharp. I think this one's pretty close. I'm gonna go with this guy. And I'm just gonna push it into the press mold and I'm working to kind of even it out. And I don't know, but I'm guessing what I think would be about even thickness all the way around. So I get it so it looks like the inside shape that I saw right before. And then I'm gonna go with my thumb and try and smooth it a little bit because one of the new things about this project compared to the other ones is we're gonna think about functionality, definitely. If I'm gonna be able to actually drink tea, how many of you actually drink tea? Oh, fabulous!
Iced tea.
Look at that! Iced tea. It's good with honey.
Sweet tea.
I like chamomile.
My dad makes some tea outside.
Yeah?
Makes it the old-fashioned.
Nice. So, all right, we'll talk about functionality because if you use your teapots, that's like the best tasting tea you'll ever have in your whole life when it's from your very own teapot. So, what you're gonna do, I get it nice as even as I can. I smooth it out so that I don't have like cracks and crevices. The tea could get stuck in there. And I'm gonna level it. I'm using a Fetley knife, a butter knife, or whatever, you know, whatever works. Take a knife, slice it off. Now, as I look at this, it's not bad. It's a little thick over here. It's not quite consistent. If I were keeping this and it weren't just a demo piece, I might even it out a little more, but pretty good. This thickness is kind of what I'm going for. If it's a little thicker, that's fine. So I got that. Now, I would make sure it's as even as I can. I'm gonna flip this thing over, and if I'm lucky, look at that, pops right out. Like magic, poof. Now, there are some little cracks and things in here. And you can see this soaked up the moisture. So it did exactly what it was supposed to do, where the moisture is in the bowl. This popped out really easily. You guys are second period. First period is going to be using the bowls. If it doesn't come out right away, which does happen, please don't do this. It's all that's going to happen is you will crack and break my bowl. See, someone was mean to my bowls. Don't do that, please. You just, little taps usually work. If that doesn't work, hello? Are you coming out of there? Just give it a little knock, talk to it, be kind. It usually will pop out. If you can't get it to come out, call me over. Now, I noticed this morning, over there was a bowl that's been fired. That is not a press mold bowl. Because if it's fired, is it still porous? What's the word? Anybody remember? What's it called? Starts with the V. Raise your hand if you know. Vicious. It's a press mold. Yes, it is. Close. Vitreous. Excuse me. Anybody remember?
Venus.
Vitreous. Yep, you had it. Vitreous. So vitreous is where the pores are closed up. So it's not going to work as a press mold anymore. Your clay's just going to get stuck in it. So don't use those. All right. There's a couple little cracks and things, not much, but I'm going to take some of that clay that I took off because I know it's the same moisture level, and I can get it. If I find a hole, I didn't press quite hard enough in a spot or two, I can add a little bit. I don't want to add too much because I don't want to make sure I'm trapping any air. Ooh, geez, I did not do a good job pressing it in there, did I at all? So now you know, pressed a little harder than I did. All right, so now I'm going to take my serrated rib, and just like with the coil pots, when you were luting the outsides, if you chose to do that on the outsides, you lute across the seams to make sure that any of those seams that are left there get luted together. And I like to use the serrated rib for this because it's better than my finger. I have this big clunky finger that's getting in there. The serrated rib is like tiny little fingers that are going to go not quite as hard, and I can then smooth it and make it even on the outside. Now, I am not making this perfect because I got a lot more work to do on it. If I make this perfectly smooth, then it's wasting my time. So those of you with like the smoothing disease where you smooth everything, resist the urge. I'm not naming names, you know who you are. Smooth at the end, saves yourself lots of time. All right, so there's this guy. Now, that was what it would look like with a real shallow bowl. There's some really shallow ones over there that we can use for plates. They don't work so well for teapots. So look for one with some depth. All right, I'm gonna take some more clay. Tell me what to do now. I have my blob. Let me get a little bigger blob this time. What do I do? What do I do?
Pound it out.
Pound it out. I'm gonna get it all kind of stuck together. Pound it out. How thick do I pound it out, Alondra? How thick do I go?
A finger.
A finger thick, thank you. I'm gonna push it in a little better this time. And I overlap. Get that pushed in there so it's pretty even. Next one. And I can do things too, like some of you, I don't know if it was in this class, where somebody showed me a teapot where you can actually see the coils. You can put coils and balls of clay and put those in there and just smush them and lute the backs. It kind of looks like a rock texture sometimes. You can have some cool effects with that. You just got to be a little more careful when you put it all together. All right, so let's see if I can get this pressed in a little better this time. And I try to make it as even as I can just by the feel of it. I'm going to come back to my wooden rib, even it out. What do I do next? Carolina, what's next? I got this evened out as best I can, I think.
Then
Cut the top, exactly, thank you. I'm going to kind of smooth this a little bit. I like to get the inside as smooth as I can now because I can do it by pressing against the press mold and it's not going to mess up the surface. I don't know, did I mention? There's a reason I flipped it upside down over here before I started fixing up the surface. And the reason for that is that there's air trapped underneath there and that helps it keep its shape. If I were to pick this up like this, where is it? And start like looting this way, it's starting to elongate, it's losing its shape. Well, I just worked really hard to make it fit into that press mold. So I don't want to mess up my form so quickly. All right, so just like I said, I'm going to slice this off, slice it level, get rid of the extra, check my thickness. I got a thin spot right here. Looks like it's just right this one section. So I'm going to loot that in, get this all fixed up. Sometimes you got to go back with your rib, sometimes it's okay. So let's see here. Not too bad, that's an okay thickness. I'm okay with that. Let's see, how do I do? Oh, see, there you go. Come on now. Not bad. All right. I would flip these, come up here. I'd spend more time making these cracks go away, but you guys have seen me do that. I know you know how to do this, so I'm not going to spend much more time. I'm just going to kind of get the major ones so I know that it's all set. All right. Now, they're pretty close. I'm all right. If they're not close enough, I can work with it. You can put a coil in between to kind of loot them together. But I'm going to figure out, kind of reminds me of an acorn. I'm make an acorn teapot. Have a little squirrel sitting on top. That'd be kind of fun. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. All right. Now, I have to join these together to become one piece. What do I do? Diamond, what's my first step? Score and slip. Fabulous. So I'm going to score this edge. And I believe I'm moving down the form here now. So you might want to take some notes. Don't forget, score and slip. You can't just stick them together. What's going to happen if I just stick them together? Eventually what? They're just going to fall apart. They might be okay now. So I scored the edges. I'm going to add some nice watery, gooey slip. Butter it down there like so. There you go. What do I do next?
You wrote that, right? Score and slip, yes.
Score and slip, yes. What next? Ready? Scoochy, scoochy, scoochy. You said it, all right, good. Until it, like I kind of wiggle it. It feels like it's sticking now. Wiggle it till it sticks there. Now what? Think back to your slab boxes. How do I make a super secure seam? Super secure.
That's number 2.
I get a coil. You're right. Even before the coil, there's one little thing next. Yep, score it or stitch it. That's exactly it. Remember we talked about how it's kind of like a baseball. I can go this way, although this is really sloppy baseball. In the interest of time, I'm gonna scooch this way a little.
What's the second step?
The second one was the stitching. So I scored and slipped. I'm gonna stitch this outside edge together. I could use a needle, but this is quick. Some people would still call this scoring. It's the same thing, but basically it's losing these pieces together, right? And now, it was a little bit bigger, the top piece, and I ended up pushing that clay down. So I've actually really shoved clay into that seam. But let's say I hadn't, and it's just sort of an open seam. What can I add to that? Caitlin, you said it. Coil, yep. And I remember, it's not just any coil. It's the wormy coil, right? I want it thin and slippery, like a worm. So I make my wormy. Do you want me to dangle it in your face like last time in the demo? I won't. All right. And I'm going to put this around that. Oh. It's still alive, because you can cut a worm in half and it's still alive, remember? Did you know that? Did you know?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that fabulous? Fabulous worm fact. Now, notice I'm flattening this. As I do it, I'm trying to stay right along that seam, and I'm working it in. I don't want a blob. I want a lovely, even form when I'm all done. And it's not there yet. Right now, it's kind of a blob. And if I wanted to keep that acorn design that I had, I could. But especially because these didn't quite match up, it's not a bad idea to get that coil in there. And I can lute it in with my fingers like this. I can come back with the serrated rib and make some sort of larger strokes with it now so it fits in. Let's move this here a little bit. And the nice thing about this is that just like before where I trapped air underneath it while I was working on it, there's air trapped in here right now. So that's going to help me put a little pressure on the inside and I can make my shape more even. It's kind of sticking out right there. So I need to hold this now because it keeps getting stuck there. And I might, as I do this, I might look at it and notice like, it's not quite even. Now's the time to fix that form because it's really hard to even once you got a handle stuck on there or something else stuck on there. It's not going to work so well for me. So I want to look at this form, not my surface.
Ooh, you could get an apple.
It does look like an apple. Should we make an apple teapot?
Because it's starting to form like an apple.
Yeah. So now, see how the side's sticking out a little more? I have my stir stick! And I say, stop it, get back in there! Stop it! Just gently. No, just be kind again, remember? But I can just gently, the wood is nice, and that's why I'm using the stir stick. Rulers work too, but those are metal, so sometimes they kind of stick. But I like using these because I know it's not going to stick to the clay as much, because again, like the wood will just absorb a little water. But I'm going to check this side and, you know, get it as even. Like get my form fixed up exactly how I want it. And I can do things now too. I can really mess with my form if I want. I could say, this doesn't make an apple anymore, but maybe I want to go and make it almost squarish. Now I can kind of tap in. Maybe it's like a turtle.
Yeah.
I could dedicate it to one of my turtles, Shelly and Turbo. Which one do you think is the girl, Shelly or Turbo?
Turbo.
It is. I always feel like Shelly should be the girl's name. But they like Turbo better, and we got Turbo first. So I know. Alright, well when I did that, you gotta be careful, because I just opened up a crack. We'll fix that later. Alright, so let's just say it's perfect. It's not, but we gotta keep moving along here. And I got my form all set the way I want it. Now, so we got the form together, we went through the bonding steps. Handle! Time to make a handle. A bunch of different ways to make a handle. Take a guess. What's one way I can make a handle?
A coil.
A coil. Fabulous. That's one way. What's another way? Think about things you've built. What's something you've created that could make a handle? A what? A slab. Thank you, Julia. Perfect. Ooh, that's a chunk. An easy way to make a slab that acts like a handle, because it's long and thin, is to start with a coil. So I could make this into my handle, or I could flatten it. Remember how we threw it down a couple times? Ooh. I'm going to go straight down. Now, it went a little uneven. I could cut off my edges. I don't want sharp edges on my handle because that's unpleasant, you know, like you get a sharp glaze on there, I pick it up and it's like, ow! You don't want to drink tea with going with the hurt finger, right? That's not soothing. So I'm just going to round these corners a little bit. And then another thing I'm doing is I'm working some water into this so that I can kind of bend it and move it a little more. I'm going to show you a modified pulled handle. You can start a pulled handle with a coil or a slab. But what I'm going to do, so the first two options on there, ways to create a handle, was coil and slab. The last one is a pulled handle. I highly encourage, I want everybody to try a pulled handle and get to a handle. Your first one's not going to work. If you do, good job. Beginner's luck, good for you. But they almost never work the first time. I'm going to get a little water on my fingers, and I like to use these two fingers here, and I just keep getting water on them, and I pull them down like this, and I'm working water into the clay. So a couple things are happening. I'm making it more pliable, more plastic by adding water repeatedly, and I'm thinning the bottom edge so I can get more like a delicate look to it, more designs. more possibilities with how I bend it, because working this water in is going to allow me to bend it in a bunch of different ways. I can make it more curvy than I could otherwise. So I'm going to round those corners a little bit, and I just, oh, see, and I put a gash in it. That's not the idea. That might break right there. But I'm basically thinning and using gravity to help me pull the handle and thin the handle. And this is longer than I need, so I'm going to make it into 2 in a minute. But start longer than you need, because what often happens is all of a sudden you're like, oh, whoops, press a little too hard. And that's fine. It's going to happen. It's going to mess up, but that's how it goes. And I'm keep working this water in. Can you kind of see how it tapers a little bit? This clay's a little bit drier. It's not tapering very fast on me. But I can get sort of a nice, interesting taper and get some thin edges too. So just to show you some possibilities, I'll cut this. Now let's just say this is my handle. Anytime I want to bend clay, I'm going to push it into itself, because then it's less likely to want to break on me, because instead of stretching it, I'm pushing it together. Now I'm going to take this little guy. Here's my handle. It could be you have a little handle as part of your design. This is maybe a 1-finger handle. You need to think about that. Remember, this is functional. If my hand fits in here, does a finger actually fit in there so I can actually pour the tea? If that's the case, maybe I have 1 finger that goes in and 1 finger that sits underneath, so that as I'm using it, it sits like that. That could be a possibility. Now this handle doesn't stick out very well, so a C might actually work. If I had a big C coming out here, I'd be asking these 2 tiny little edges to support a lot of clay sticking out. And the chances of it falling off, pretty good. So what if I change it up and I make it into a question mark shape? And I should have cut off a little more so you could see it better. But if I make a question mark shape, now there's more clay touching, and it's got more surface area to help it be stronger. So the question mark shape is going to be much better for it to sit, and I know it's going to stay. It's much stronger. Now I'm going to take this one off, because we're going to use the pulled handle. I'm going to show you a little bit of what the pulled handle can do. So I've kind of made a nice smooth edge. I'm going to make this the question mark shape. Press it into itself. And then I can do fun things. Like I can take this. Let's see. Yeah, I should have done this one a little more. Maybe I make a little swirly handle. A regular coil or slab is not very, I'll drop it, is not very likely to do something like that. It's because I pulled it that now I can get this interesting shape and do more with it. And it's really easy for me to go like this and put that on there and go, ah, it's nice. But do you see how it's not lined up? You gotta make sure it lines up vertically. So I'm gonna line this up vertically. And if this is really soft and gooey, you might be just fine to dilute it in. If I wanna keep this little swirl at the bottom, I definitely have to score and slip that. So I'm gonna mark where I want this to go. There we go. Lay that down carefully. So I've marked where it's gonna sit. I'm gonna score and slip. Anytime I wanna put something on here that I don't wanna loot, I gotta score and slip it really well. It's not really staying there. Come here, give me some slip. Oh, that's better. A little goober on there. And I'm gonna score here where it touches, and here. I'm going to scooch, scoochy, scoochy. And bring that up there. Scoochy, 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 scoochy. And here I'm gonna loop, just to have a little more space there. And I'm gonna think about it. I gotta fit 2 fingers in there, and I want them to wiggle, because remember, it's gonna shrink. So as I'm putting this on, I'm testing it out. And I don't want the handle to sit too far off, because if the handle goes way out here and I have to hold it, and this is full of hot water, this is gonna be heavy. So your handle should fit your fingers, but not too far out. All right, so there's that. There's my, let's hope that stays. And it's really wet and gooey right now. I'm gonna fix up that surface with a brush and a little water on it, probably tomorrow. It's got a little chance to dry out. Now, the lid, right, next. Handle questions. All right, flip her over. Cutting the lid. Halloween is coming up. How many of you have made a jack-o'-lantern? Well, not yet. Other years maybe. You're right. It's kind of early. You make it now, it's going to be like moldy and disgusting by the end, right? Anybody ever made a jack-o'-lantern? Yeah? Awesome. Awesome. So when you made the lid, did you get to pull out all the goo? I kind of like how the squishy feels in my head. Like, you know. Did you, when you did the lid, I digress a little bit there. How did you cut it? Do you remember? The trick? What is it? At an angle. That's the key. If you cut the lid in, vertically, then you're like, oh, and the lid's down there inside, right? And you got to stick your hand in the muck and get it out. If you don't want to do that, you got to cut it at an angle. So I'm going to take something and trace it. I got some baby food jars, some little things that you can use so I get a nice edge. Where's that other one I got? Here, this guy. This is a nice thin little agave nectar one. This one's a little big for this. This one looks better to me. All right, so I'm going to mark it first, make it straight, make sure it's lining up. Needle or, some little thin edge tool works nicely. So I mark it. Looks okay. And then I'm going to make a mark that goes across to the side there. It's going to go across here. Now, I'm not going to leave that because it's not a pretty mark. It just sort of sits there. But that mark shows me where the lid's going to go together. Because until I have some design that shows me how it fits, it never is going to fit exactly all the way around. So I want to make sure I get that there so I know how it's going to fit together. All right, so now I'm going to use my fettling knife. I want a clean fettling knife, straight one. You got some bendy ones, don't use those to cut your lids because the thin part will work really nicely to make a nice clean edge. Remember, you don't saw at it one smooth line. I got to go to an angle, just like Julia told me, so that it doesn't fall through. So I'm going to come around and cut this lid at a nice angle. Come on. Oh, 50. Voila! Wow, that got thin on the bottom. That's a little too thin. But you can kind of see how that lid is at an angle. So that edge there is angled, and now I line up my line, I can put it back on there. I know how it's going to fit, and it doesn't fall in. Be very careful with this. If you're working on the sides of your pot, lifting this up, the lid could fall off. And if you do this, where you take the lid off, and I see students like, okay, little lid, and they put it over here for safekeeping, and they're working on their project, and it's time to clean up, and they go, dun, 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 dun. Don't do that to your lid. It happens all the time. This lid fits perfectly because it matches where you cut. If you take this out and you have to make a new one, do you think you're ever going to take another random piece of clay and make it fit as perfectly? No, because what does this do as it's drying? It shrinks, and as it's shrinking and matching the shrink and the cut of this piece. Where's my edge? There we go. So a new one, you'll have to do something a little different to make it work. You can, so if you squish your lid or it falls off, there's always someone who's like, oh, look at that, that's such a nice design. Oh. So if that happens to you, we'll fix it. It's just gonna be a little different lid. So try to hang on to that lid. All right, now, I need to make a handle for my lid that relates to this whole design, right? So, oh, I have a handle here. I'm always thinking about how it comes back together. So if I'm gonna make a little lid for that handle, I'm sorry, a little handle for my lid, that's what I meant to say. You know what I meant, right? I'm going to repeat that. I'm gonna make two little handles like I just did. See how it goes. So I'm gonna work a little water into it so I can bend it a lot. And this is one option. Obviously you can relate it a lot of different ways. This one over here, the little cubes, kind of related. I'm gonna roll up this edge like I did on the other one. Maybe I roll this, see it's like a tiny handle. And I'm gonna put it here so that it lines up with this. I always gotta look over the top and make sure it lines up. And then if I were keeping this, we're getting low on time, so I'm just gonna keep going. I would score and slip this very carefully, but I'm just gonna smoosh this part in for right now so you guys can see how it works. So, I've thought about how this design I want to match this design. So again, I'm thinking about the overall unification of the piece and making them fit together. All right, so now, how are we doing? Woo, I gotta go fast. We're on to the spout. Now this one, if you gotta make 5 spouts, I don't care, because you will have learned spouts then. But typically, kind of like the handle, make a few, don't worry about it, see which one you like. Where's the soft clay? Here's my soft clay. I'm gonna give myself a nice clean surface here, and I'm going to throw, this is my soft clay? That's not my soft clay. A tiny slab, a thin, tiny slab. So I'm gonna start with my blob, pound it out just like before. Throw it a few times. I'm not sure how I got that crack in there. There we go. Because I'm going to ask this to bend a ton to be round. So I can't be too thick or it's not going to want to bend. Now, I also want to compress it. So I'm going to take my wooden dowel, and it's going to be like my mini rolling pin. And all that clay that's stretched to flatten, now I'm compressing. Now notice as I do this, I'm not squishing it off to the side. I'm just coming up to that edge because I don't want thin edges. I want it to be as much the same thickness as I can. And just like I did with the handle, I'm gonna work some water into this so that it's really plasticky and really wants to move for me. Now as I do that, I don't like working with gooey clay. See, it got all gooey. Should have worked that in just a little bit more. So I like to put a little bit of water on it, and I work it in until it's not shiny anymore. That's when I know I'm good to flip it over and get the other side. So I sort of like make my clay shiny, rub it all in, and that's just going to make it so it's less likely to crack along that surface. That water will help keep that together. All right. I want to make sure it lifts off. Now this is a thin. It's not a pancake. This is a crepe. This is thin. Okay. All right. So I'm going to cut one straight edge. I'm going to cut a top straight edge, and I'm going to cut a diagonal line. So I have, oop, a little too close to that edge there. So it's cut at an angle, a bevel, just like my lid, repeating the bevel. So I have straight, straight, bevel. And now, I'm going to go this way. I can take my dowel, this is going to be my armature. Who remembers what an armature is? Did we talk armature? No, we didn't, because we didn't do this after the other one. An armature holds up your clay while you're building. My arm is holding up the dowel. So that's the way to remember that. The armature holds up your clay. A-R, is it on here? I don't know. Put it on there if it's not. Armature, A-R-M-A-T-U-R-E. Holds up your clay while you're building. You usually take them out. Oh, there's my baby food jar. I'll have that for later. All right, now I can roll this around, and this armature is supporting my clay. So if I roll this dowel around, the dowel is my armature. It's the thing that's supporting the clay. So as I roll the clay around the dowel, or roll the clay around the armature, I can make a really thin spout if I want. But I don't know if you noticed, I'm guessing you did, hopefully you've done some of your sketches, that as the spout came to the body of the teapot, oftentimes they get wider. So if you're gonna do that, you want one side that's close to the dowel and one side where you kind of add some space. So I'm gonna kind of open that up and add some space over here so I get a cone shape. And then, as soon as it tucks over, I'm gonna lute, and you can do this on the table, but I'm going to scoop with the dowel, kind of make a scooping motion to lute that inside slab together. So I get a smooth inside slab. And then I'm going to take a needle or a knife, and I'm going to slice again at an angle as soon as it overlaps. And then I flip it over, and I want the dowel, again, it's my support, so I'm going to hold that so it supports my seam. And I can either come along there with a finger and lute it in. Sometimes it's kind of clunky, like my finger tends to be too much. So sometimes I use the little tiny fingers of the serrated rib to lute it over. But I gotta make sure that I'm holding that against it. And then smooth that out so it's even. And it's pretty soft and pretty thin. So I don't do a whole lot now. to this edge. I'm gonna fix up that edge more tomorrow when it's a little drier. And then I take it and I stick it on, huh? Perfect. Looks good, doesn't it? What do you think, Georgia? Good?
Yeah. I'd probably do the same thing.
You're being nice to me by saying yeah.
Same exact thing.
It doesn't really look so good, does it? Unless I'm making a Pinocchio teapot, it doesn't really match the teapot at all. And what happens right now, if I put water in this, see what's gonna happen if I put water in this right now? It just, well, like if I try to fill it, yeah, it's gonna just spill right out, isn't it? That's not effective teapot if it just drips out while I'm trying to make it, right? How can I steep my tea? So I have to put first thing I need the opening to be in the top half of the teapot. Looks even worse, right? It doesn't match my design at all. So I have to figure out how to make this match my design. Well, everything's curvy so far. So I'm going to, again, bend it by pressing the clay into itself. So I have a thumb inside for support right now. And I'm bending that clay. And I'm trying to not squish it too much, but give it a curve. And maybe I'll give it, these have a little like flourish at the end. Flourish. Maybe I'll try and give this one a little flourish. It's getting better. I don't really like this like, this end coming up. So I can do something like maybe I want to make it level. See what that looks like. That's better. Now anytime I want to cut this, I have to cut one side at a time. If I just go, whoosh, I'm going to like squish this thing I was just so careful to make nice and round. And it wants to rip, so I got to be really careful how I cut because I just ripped it. It's hard when it's this gooey and thin, but it's got to be this gooey and thin to make it curve. So I could spend some more time fixing this up. We don't really have more time. So maybe that edge, that's good, right? Now, what angle do I want? I'm going to get level with my teapot and say, how do you feel, teapot? How should this fit you? Not really, but you know. And then I'm going to play with different angles so that it fits the style of the teapot. I like it right here. Now I got to make sure that where I attach it matches the side. So I take the knife or the needle and I'm going to make a curve by having it rest on the teapot. So I took this and I rested it like this. And then I used it while it was resting. I cut, this is the wrong one, that was a mess up. I made this mark. So I know how it would fit along that side. Now I'm going to cut one side at a time. I'm going to rip this piece off just so I can see how I need to cut there. And it's going to end up kind of like something like this. And then I put this back up here. And here's key. I got to look over the top and make sure it's lined up. It's really easy to do this. Well, it's kind of lined up. Not really. I want to make sure it's nice and straight. So I'm going to line it up this way so all these things are in line. I put that on there. That matches the curve of the teapot, right? And if not, I can make a new one. I can cut some more off. It's a little bit angled, but I can fix it up. We're gonna say it's good. I might fix it some more if I were keeping it, but sure, it's good. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm going to mark where it goes so I know where it's gonna fit. Now, this is not my hole. If I cut that out, I have nothing to attach this to, right? So the hole that the tea is going to come out must be smaller. So I'm actually going to cut a hole. And I wanted a nice clean hole. Oh, come on. I didn't go all the way through. Should use a fettling knife. I always like cutting it better with a fettling knife. There we go. Take that piece out. I would clean this up, make it purty, cleaner than that. Now I have places for that to sit. I have a place to score and slip and a place for that to come out. So I would score and slip this piece together. I would do a better job than this, but I've got like a minute. And then, let's get this on here. This will work better. I put my slip. Scorchy, scorchy, scorchy. And get that piece on there. Now, we are low on time. I'm going to talk about the foot tomorrow. It's not straight. Make sure that's straight and lined up. Cleaning this edge. So we'll do that part tomorrow and talk about your final design tomorrow. But for now, you have some of these main pieces and how they're all together. You can put a coil in here too to even it out. That's up to you. Right now, this needs a little more scoochy scooch and a little more support to get that in there. So I'd probably stitch and coil around here to get a nice smooth attachment to there too. So please make sure your name is on this. Put it in your locker. We'll do the last little step tomorrow. Thank you.